I started with nothing. A dream, a patch of land, and endless sacrifice. Blood, sweat, and tears went into building a clinic from the ground up to serve a struggling community. But just as hope was blossoming, the ones I trusted most, the people I called family, showed up demanding a share. A share they never earned. A share they refused to pay for. What happens when love turns into greed and blood ties feel like chains? The sun barely peeked over the horizon when I found myself kneeling in the dusty earth, hands raw and trembling. This patch of soil, scrawny and cracked, held more weight in my heart than any gold mine ever could. For months I had scrimped and saved every penny, sacrificed sleep and comfort, driven by a dream that felt too big for someone like me, to build a clinic where there was none. No hospital. No doctor within miles. Just broken people with nowhere to turn, waiting for death or a miracle. I couldn't stand to watch anymore. My family had said I was chasing shadows, wasting time. "You're crazy," my father had said, eyes hard with disbelief. My siblings called it a fool's errand. They had their own lives, their own plans, and no intention of backing a dream that seemed too fragile to survive the harsh world. But here I was, alone, exhausted and determined, with nothing but this barren land as proof of my conviction. The first days felt like punishment. Shovels met rock. Sweat blurred my vision. My hands throbbed with blisters, fingers stiff from the cold night air that followed the scorching days. To build a clinic, I had to learn how to build a roof, plaster walls, mend pipes, skills I never dreamed I would need. Every night, I sat by a flickering candle, poring over medical manuals gleaned from the city library, imagining the life-saving equipment that one day would hum quietly in this humble space. I remembered the faces, the mother clutching her feverish child, the old man limping through the mud, the young woman who had lost hope. They were etched in my mind, the fuel for every aching muscle. Raising funds was a story of its own. I knocked on doors, many shutting in my face, others shaking their heads with pity. "Why don't you get a real job?" someone asked. But a few kind souls gave what little they had, seeds planted by hope. Slowly, the dream began to take shape. Concrete for walls, rusted metal sheets for a roof, second-hand beds. And yet, the hardest battle was unseen, the loneliness. My family never came. They watched from a distance, whispering doubts and judgments. Invitations to dinner were rare. Calls went unanswered. The wound was sharper than any tool. But I swallowed the pain and pressed on. For every brick laid, for every stitch of the clinic's first curtain, I whispered a vow. This would be more than a building. It would be a sanctuary born from sweat and heartache. Weeks turned into months. The sound of hammers and voices of a few volunteers who believed in the dream, filled the air. The first examination room was bare and humble, but it was mine. It was real. It pulsated with the promise of healing and hope. That evening, as I stood outside the clinic under a blanket of stars, I felt a fragile joy bloom inside me. A decade of dreaming had finally poured into this place. Yet beneath the triumph, a shadow lingered. The knowledge that those who should have stood with me remained distant. That someday, when this clinic was more than just walls and hopes, they might return with demands. But tonight, I let those thoughts sleep. Tonight, the dream was alive. The clinic was standing, but every day was a battle against forces I never imagined. Supplies didn't arrive on time. The power was erratic, bills piled up like mountain ranges. Patients came with wounds deeper than scars, stories of pain, neglect, and despair. There were nights I sat alone in the quiet clinic, the rustle of crickets mocking my exhaustion. I was drained, body, mind, soul. The depression that whispered "give up" was louder than ever on those long nights. But every time I thought about closing the doors, the faces of those who relied on me flashed before my eyes. The community began to notice. Slowly, people showed up not just for treatment but to offer help. Small acts of kindness, a cup of tea, a warm smile. It was a fragile web of hope, but it held. Yet, the wounds from my own family remained raw. They still stayed away, as if my dream was a rebellion against them. Their silence was deafening. The ones who should have been my pillars become mere shadows. The clinic took everything from me. Friends faded, invitations stopped, and every penny earned was poured back into this dream. I missed birthdays, family gatherings, simple joys, the warmth of human connection. But if I failed, who else would step in? One evening, when the rain poured like the weight on my heart, a mother came in clutching her sick child. The child's eyes were wide and fearful. I worked through the night, armed with nothing but hope and the little I had learned. When dawn broke, the child's fever began to break. That moment was a victory no money could buy. It reminded me why I sacrificed everything. Still, the harsh reality stayed, alone with a dream, fighting invisible wars. Just as the clinic began to breathe with life and hope, they came. My family. Not as supporters, but as claimants. They appeared at the clinic doors, faces familiar but eyes sharp, calculating. We deserve a part, they said. It's family after all. Shock strangled me. After years of absence, after every harsh word and cold shoulder, they wanted shares, ownership, power. Where were you when I was building this from the ground? I asked, voice breaking. Silent stares. Their memories selective, glossing over the nights I toiled alone, the times they laughed at my dreams. The air thickened with tension, accusations flying like daggers. Old wounds reopened, long-buried family secrets surfacing. They spoke of promises I never heard, of sacrifices they claimed to have made. Words that dug deep, stabbing my heart. How can you just come now? I cried. Without ever lifting a finger, without financing a brick? The clinic wasn't just a structure. It was my soul. And now it felt like a battleground. Days turned into a war zone of sticky stares and bitter words. Family dinners turned cold and empty. The clinic's walls, once filled with hope, echoed with arguments. I faced a decision, to protect what I built alone, or risk losing everything trying to keep my family in. The clinic's dimly lit break room felt smaller than ever. The fluorescent light above flickered uncertainly, casting long shadows on the tired faces gathered around the battered wooden table. This modest room, once a refuge after long days of healing others, now bore witness to a storm that threatened to shatter everything. Family and dream alike. Their eyes brimmed with frustration, anger, and something colder, calculation. The air was thick, every breath heavy with unspoken grievances. You think this clinic belongs only to you? My sister's voice cracked, trembling with a mix of hurt and accusation. We are family. Family means sharing, not hoarding. I met her gaze, fighting to keep my voice steady. Sharing? You call this sharing? You never lifted a finger to help. You never sent even a single penny. When I was drowning, struggling to pay bills, where were you? Silence stretched, unbearable and sharp. My brother's jaw tightened. We all had our lives. We weren't just sitting around while you played Marta. But I was building something for everyone. For us. For this community. The words came out in a rush, raw and desperate. You acted like I was wasting my time, like my efforts were meaningless. And now, after all this time, you want a stake. As if you earned it. I did sacrifice, my sister snapped, tears catching in her throat. You think I didn't feel guilt? We had arguments, yes, but I never wanted to see you fail. Her words hung, fragile but accusing. Where was your call? Your invitation to dinners? Your presence at my graduation? You chose this dream over us. The room simmered with years of pent-up pain, unspoken hurts finally laid bare. I didn't choose to be alone, I whispered. I chose survival. I chose hopes bigger than us all. My father, silent until now, finally spoke with voice weathered by age and regret. I should have been there for you, son. Maybe I failed. But this sudden demand, what is it really about? Money? Control? Or something deeper? He looked at each of us, his eyes pleading for an answer none of us dared give. My sister's shoulders shook with sobs. I missed you. We missed you. But it felt like you wanted no part of us once you started building this clinic. The accusation stung. It's not that I wanted to exclude you, I said, voice breaking. It's that your doubts became walls around me. I was fighting more than just this clinic. I was fighting my own family's rejection. Her tears slid down her cheeks as she wiped them away, shamed yet defiant. Maybe we both lost something. Maybe we could have fought together if there had been an open door. The tension folded momentarily, a brief pause like the quiet before a storm. Then my cousin, usually silent, stepped forward, voice low but firm. You carry all the credit, but you also carry all the burden. We want to help. We want in. We're family. Isn't that enough? The question felt like a knife twisting. Was it really about helping? Or was it about claiming what I built? I clenched my fists. Help isn't what I see. It's demands. It's entitlement. This clinic was born in loneliness, in sacrifice you never witnessed. You can't just walk in and rewrite my story. The room pulsed with anger, pain, tears, an unbearable mix of love and betrayal. Hours passed, voices rising and falling, nothing resolved. Later, when everyone left, the silence that settled was suffocating. I sat in the empty room, the weight of their words like stones in my chest. The line between family and strangers blurred. The people I once trusted with my heart now threatened to unravel the life I had built alone. Was this the price of dreams? To stand guard over what you create from scratch, fending off those you once called your own? Bitter tears slipped down my cheeks, each drop a mix of grief and defiance. For a moment, I questioned everything. The sacrifices, the loneliness, the dream itself. But deep inside, beneath the hurt and doubt, a flame still burned. A flame that whispered, "This clinic is more than walls or money. It is hope. It is life." And that hope was worth every battle, even the hardest one. Family. The days that followed the storm in the clinic's break room were heavy with silence. A silence filled with more questions than answers. It was as if the air itself was weighing down on my shoulders, challenging me to dig deeper, to unearth not only the fight at hand but the roots that birthed it. I wandered through the quiet halls of the clinic one evening, the soft hum of distant machines the only company. My fingers brushed the walls I had built, walls that held more than plaster and paint. They held memories, sacrifices, and dreams stitched into every corner. But beneath the surface of the present conflict lay a family history tangled with betrayals, broken promises, and choices made in desperation. I found myself back in the past, years before the first brick was laid. The family kitchen, once bustling with laughter and warmth, had grown cold and fractured over time. My father, a man wearied by lost opportunities and the weight of providing, had been a quiet tempest, his love buried beneath fatigue and unspoken regrets. He once told me, in a rare moment of vulnerability, "Son, sometimes we fail the people we love most because we don't know how to show it." Those words haunted me. My siblings, each carved by their own struggles, had drifted into paths that barely crossed mine. They had their own battles. Debts, heartbreaks, dreams deferred. Little wonder they turned away when my dreams seemed impossible. Yet, there were moments of unseen tension. Silent accusations masked by polite smiles, resentment festering beneath family dinners and holiday gatherings. The most painful memory was of a promise made long ago, a promise that lingered like a ghost among us. Before I had even begun thinking of the clinic, I had lined up the idea, whispered it in confidence to one sibling, hoping for support. "I'll back you," they had said, eyes bright with assurance. "When you're ready, I'll be there." But when the time came, they vanished, swallowed by excuses and distractions. I waited for a call that never came, a helping hand that never lifted. It was a betrayal not of grand gestures but of absence, the loud silence of those who said they cared. Caught in the present storm, I understood now. Building a clinic wasn't just about medicine or bricks. It was about navigating the tangled web of family secrets, unhealed wounds, and unmet expectations. The people demanding shares had their own stories of pain, stories I hadn't known, stories that didn't excuse but explained. My sister faced financial ruin, a failed marriage, and the crushing burden of motherhood. My brother wrestled with addictions, guilt, and shame. My cousins juggled their struggles, holding on to the idea of family as a last anchor. Their demands came not just from greed but from a desperate need to belong, to reclaim what they felt was rightfully theirs. One late evening, in the quiet solitude of the clinic, I sat with an old worn photo album. Faded pictures of family gatherings, birthdays, and long-forgotten smiles. I traced the outlines of faces I loved and lost, the laughter of childhood friends turned strangers, the sudden silences that grew into chasms. It hit me then that the conflict was a reflection of pain shared unevenly, love given and taken in unbalanced measures. What was at stake was more than ownership of this clinic. It was the fragile chance to mend what years had broken. The choice before me was gut-wrenching, to hold the clinic tight, guarding it against the tides of entitlement, or to open the doors cautiously, risking everything for a chance at reconciliation. Could I let go of the bitterness? Could I welcome my family without wiping away the scars of their absence? Could the clinic be a place not just for healing patients but for healing broken bonds? I reached out to an old family friend, someone who had seen us through highs and lows, a quiet mediator of sorts. He listened without judgment as I poured out my fears and frustrations. "Family is messy," he said softly. "Sometimes it takes breaking to build something new. The question isn't if you can forgive, but if you can find strength in vulnerability." His words echoed as I called my siblings to talk, not about shares or stakes, but about pain and forgiveness, about the fractured past and uncertain future. Our conversations were raw, punctuated with tears and confessions long buried. For the first time, we spoke not as adversaries but as people longing to reconnect. Yet healing would not come easily. Trust, once fractured, demands patience and proof. I proposed a path, one that honored the sacrifices I had made but allowed space for my family to participate in the clinic's future, not as entitled claimants but as partners willing to contribute. I asked them to step forward not with demands, but with actions. To build together, not tear apart. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with emotional landmines and fragile hopes. But in this precarious balance lay a chance to turn betrayal into understanding, to transform conflict into collaboration. The clinic, born from solitude and sacrifice, might yet become a symbol of renewed family bonds. And as I closed the photo album and looked toward the healing faces in this small clinic, I knew the hardest battles were yet to come, not against the world, but within the ties that bind us. The days after the fragile talks with my family were a whirlwind of mixed emotions. Hope, fear, doubt. The clinic pulsed with life, but within me, a storm raged. Could I trust them to be partners? Could they truly change, or was this just another demand wrapped in the language of reconciliation? Despite the uncertainty, I chose to believe in the possibility of healing. I laid out a plan, one built on accountability and contribution rather than entitlement. If they wanted in, they would have to roll up their sleeves, work alongside me, and invest in the clinic's future. Not as freeloaders or predators seeking easy gains, but as family ready to rebuild what had been broken. The first step was a family meeting at the clinic. I prepared the small conference room, stacked with papers, plans, and ledgers, proof of every penny spent, every sacrifice made. I wanted transparency, a foundation of truth beneath the shaky ground of trust. When they arrived, their faces bore a mix of skepticism and cautious optimism. This was no longer just about claims or emotions. This was a business, a lifeline, and a legacy. I opened the floor. "We stand at a crossroad," I began. "This clinic is my dream, built through years of hardship and sacrifice. But it is also a place that serves others, a beacon for hope. If we work together, we can make it stronger. But if division continues, we risk losing everything." Silence followed, heavy but pregnant with possibility. I gave them a simple challenge. Show commitment. Volunteer hours. Fundraising efforts. Skills offered. No handouts. Equal effort. Weeks passed. At first, the change was faint. Occasional visits, tentative help. But slowly, I saw signs. My sister stayed late, organizing patient files. My brother started managing supplies. Cousins volunteered for community outreach. Each small act was a brick laid in the shaky bridge of reconciliation. Still, shadows of doubt lurked. Old arguments flared in bleak moments. The weight of years couldn't easily be lifted overnight. One evening, after a particularly tense day, I found myself alone in the examination room, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly. The clinic was quiet, except for faint murmurs from the waiting room where my family now helped greet patients. I sat, head in hands, wrestling with fears. Fear of betrayal, fear of loss, fear of repeating the past. Then came a knock. My sister stood there, weary but honest. "We're trying," she said simply. "For you, for this clinic, for us." Her words, raw and unpolished, felt like a balm on years of wounds. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be easy. But maybe, just maybe, progress was real. Yet even as we edged closer to a fragile peace, another difficult decision loomed. I had to protect what I had built. To avoid repeating past mistakes where goodwill was exploited, I consulted a legal advisor to formalize the clinic's ownership and governance structures. The clinic couldn't survive on emotions alone. It needed rules, clarity, boundaries. Contracts were drawn, defining roles, decision-making powers, financial responsibilities. It was painful, turning family bonds into legal documents, but necessary. The contract was fair but firm. Ownership shares could be earned through tangible contributions, work, fundraising, management, not mere blood ties. It was the only way to safeguard the clinic and the dream. Presenting this to my family was perhaps the hardest moment. Some bristled at the formality, mistaking it for mistrust. But I explained gently, this is not about pushing you away. It's about building a foundation where we all stand equally, fairly. Slowly, one by one, they agreed. The clinic was no longer just mine. It was becoming ours, earned, respected, and protected. Amid these challenges, the community continued to grow around the clinic. Patients' gratitude was a constant reminder of why I endured. A mother brought her healed children to thank us. An elderly man walked unaided for the first time in years. Volunteers came forward, inspired by our mission. The clinic had become more than a structure. It was a beating heart in the community. And family, in their own imperfect ways, were beginning to embrace that. But deep inside, I knew the battle was far from over. Healing wounds, whether in bodies or hearts, takes time. Trust, once broken, must be rebuilt brick by brick. I remained vigilant, cautious but hopeful. And in the quiet moments, I reflected on the road traveled, a path filled with sacrifices, pain, and fierce love. The clinic was my legacy. But now, it was becoming our legacy. A legacy worth fighting for. The journey had been long, painful, and filled with moments of doubt, but as I stood in the clinic's modest entrance one calm morning, I could feel the weight of change, the fragile promise of a new beginning. Our family, once fractured by silence and bitterness, was learning to communicate, to listen, and to understand. The clinic had become more than a building. It was a symbol of resilience, sacrifice, and most importantly, forgiveness. We established new boundaries, between business and family, between emotions and hard decisions. With contracts and clear roles, everyone knew what was expected, and trust was built on contribution, not entitlement. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, disagreements, and sometimes old wounds reopened, but with every challenge, we grew stronger. I learned that family conflicts are not just about money or power. They are about love, fear, and the desperate need to belong. Healing required empathy, patience, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. The clinic continued to serve the community, its walls echoing stories of life saved and hope restored. It became a place where broken bodies were mended, and where broken relationships could begin to heal. Looking back, I realized that building this clinic was never just my dream. It was a shared legacy waiting to be embraced. The hardest battle wasn't bricks or finances. It was overcoming the shadows cast by those closest to me. But together, through struggle and strife, we found a way forward. A way where family and dreams can coexist. A way where sacrifice leads to shared success. And most importantly, a way where forgiveness opens the door to the future.